If you've been here for the past few weeks, then you've probably noticed a couple of different things. First of all, you have probably noticed that we're not in any sort of series. In fact, all the teaching pastors have been just teaching things that they felt like the Lord led them to. I'm going to continue with that theme this morning. But next week, we're actually going to start a new series, and it's called Skeptics, Heretics, and Saints. And it's just going to be a 3-week series looking at our questions, the way we wrestle with faith, and just creating a safe atmosphere for us to actually ask questions around our faith. And so we're going to do that the next 3 weeks. But that's the first thing you probably noticed is some standalone messages. The second thing you probably noticed if you've been here is that I haven't been. If you didn't know that, don't tell me, because right now I think you've got perfect attendance while I was gone. But I've been gone for the past several weeks, and I've been traveling and doing a few things with what's called Team World Vision. I want to take a few minutes today just to talk a little bit about that, my experience. I've had a lot of people ask, hey, tell us about your trip, what was going on. And so kind of like your aunt and uncle who went on vacation, and then they come back with the slide reel, and they invite you over, that's what today is going to be. No, hopefully not. Hopefully when you're done, that's the last thing you think of. But for those of you that don't know this, World Vision is a Christian humanitarian aid organization that, interestingly enough, we partner with them in a lot of significant ways. But they also are the number one provider of clean water around the world, which is an amazing, amazing feat. They provide more clean water to people in the world than any government does, than any other non-government organization, any nonprofit, than anyone does in the world. They provide more clean water than anyone, which is really cool. In fact, I don't know if you know this, but World Vision is headquartered in Federal Way, Washington. Which, like who thought anything good could come from Federal Way? But there you go. I guess something does. So hopefully no one's from Federal Way, but we don't want to know. They also are the number one partner with the World Food Program, which is really amazing things. So just an amazing organization. We've chosen to partner with them over the last several years in some pretty significant ways. But then Team World Vision is who I was climbing Mount Kilimanjaro with. And that's sort of a different subdivision within World Vision where the best way I can describe it is this, that they like to raise awareness and funds through ridiculous endurance events. That's the only way I know how to quantify it. The events that they do all sorts of things like there's an event in South Africa called Comrades. Anyone ever heard of Comrades before? Nobody in any of the services. It's the oldest ultra marathon in the world. It's like 50 miles through the desert, and it's like ridiculous. And they actually get people to sign up for it and raise sponsorships through those ultra marathons. There are Ironmen that go on. There's like a whole Ironman races where there's giant groups of people racing for Team World Vision, the Boston Marathon, the Chicago Marathon, all these different things. And a couple of years ago, they decided to add climbing Mount Kilimanjaro to the list of ridiculous things that people would do. And so I got a phone call several months ago, and they said, hey, we know you love World Vision, and we were just wondering if you would want to join a team of Team World Vision people and climb Kilimanjaro. And I was like, well, that sounds easy. So sure, I'll do it. But actually I said yes, and I said yes for a really specific reason, because Team World Vision is incredibly effective at raising ridiculous amounts of support for the work of World Vision around the world. It's unbelievable, almost all volunteer-led. And in fact, this trip, the few people that went up the mountain with me, just in this trip alone, we raised 1,400 sponsorships for kids, which is unbelievable. To give you an idea, at all the years that we've been doing that here, we've got 600 kids sponsored. In a few months, a few of us got 1,400 kids sponsored. To monetize that for you, the average person stays with the child sponsorship 5 to 7 years, and that equates to around $3.5 to $4.5 million that we raised in just a few months by climbing a stupidly huge mountain. Yeah, okay, that's good. Thank you. Guys getting excited. By the way, Summit accounted for 180 of those 1,400. Just a few months ago, we did a sponsorship weekend, so you all had a part in this, and it's a really amazing thing. But back to the Kilimanjaro thing. What I want to share with you today is just something that God began to stir in me on the side of a really big mountain. In fact, has anyone ever traveled to Africa before? Anyone in the room? We've had a few people in each service. They will tell you that somehow, somewhere, someone decided to make getting to Africa the most complicated thing in the world. Like, they don't want people to go there, apparently, because it takes forever, and there's like all sorts of different complications. But after just hours and hours, like 30 or 40 hours of travel, I find myself in a bus with a bunch of other people. We got our backpacks, and we're headed to Kilimanjaro National Park. And I'm starting to have this like freak out moment because we're gonna hike 52 miles in 6 days, and in the middle of that somehow summit like a 20,000 foot mountain. Which, by the way, it's Kilimanjaro, not Everest. I've had so many people say, how was Everest? I'm like, No. Like, Everest is for crazy people. I'm only mostly crazy, like not completely crazy, right? So we're getting ready to do this huge climb, and I'm really nervous, and we get there the first day, and to my relief, the first day is really, really easy. In fact, it's super easy. We kind of make our way to the first camp, and we get there. I like all of a sudden have this realization, like there's like something, like God could do something in this. Like the last time, like people, every time I read about people in the Bible going up on mountains, like big stuff happens, right? So I'm like, I'm going up on a really big mountain. Maybe something really big is going to happen in my life. And so like, God, give me 10 commandments. And so the first full day on the mountain, I wake up in the morning and the sun hasn't come up yet. It's just starting to crest on the horizon. And behind me are the peaks of Kilimanjaro. And it's just this gorgeous scene. And so I go find this spot almost by myself. And it's hard to be by yourself with all these people on this camp. But I go find a spot and I get my journal out. And I'm just like, I'm going to start reflecting. I'm going to be really deep here. And so I start writing in my journal. And while I'm writing, all of a sudden a verse pops in my mind. And I'm just going to tell you, I am just jaded enough that I don't go into things like this, like looking for a theme verse for the trip. In fact, they were encouraging us, has the Lord given you a word for the trip? And I was like, whatever, just give me my hiking boots, let's go. And so I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden this verse just sort of drops on me. And it was like one of those moments, like, I don't know why I'm thinking of it. It's just there. And so I write it down. And it's from the Old Testament prophet Micah, the 6th chapter, verse 8. And it says this: He has shown you, O man, what is good, and what does the Lord require of you? But to do justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. So I hear this verse, and I decide I'm going to write it down. I know it really well, and here's why I know it really well. It's actually a passage of Scripture that I have used and love for a particular type of scenario. In fact, This year marks my 25th year of doing vocational ministry, of working in the church, working in amazing churches, big churches, small churches, all sorts of churches, but great churches that are doing great things in communities. But churches are also organizations, just like any other organization. And as a leader in this organization, there are times that there are difficult decisions that we have to make. There are times when there are complicated things you have to navigate and choices that sometimes might upset a certain person or might upset a certain group of people. And so when it comes to complicated decisions, there's this matrix that I've used in my mind for years and years to help navigate complex organizational choices. And it's this. It's really simple. It's make the right decision, treat people well, and walk humbly. In fact, I've often told younger leaders, if you reverse it, if you walk humbly and you treat people well, you rarely will land on making the right decision. And so oftentimes we have to be very objective, and you have to look at a situation, a scenario, and say, okay, what is the right decision here? And then once you've made that decision, you treat people well, including and especially those who are impacted by the decision. And then you make sure you walk humbly and realize, I could be wrong. And so for years and years, that's a leadership matrix that I've used. And I don't know if you noticed this, but it's Micah 6:8. To do justice, make the right decision. To love mercy, treat people well. And to walk humbly. It aligns with this. And so for me, for years, Micah 6:8's been this really beautiful verse. And then all of a sudden, I'm sitting on top of a mountain, and there aren't that many leadership decisions to make. In fact, there were none to make because I wasn't the leader. I'm just sitting there. And the Lord just begins to open up a new dimension of this passage for me and show me some new things. And I start to realize this isn't just a pattern for making decisions. This is a pattern that's being given for life. In fact, notice what the verse says. It says, He has shown you. He has shown you. I think there's a really interesting moment in that verse for him to say, what's about to be shared with you is not a mystery. You don't need some sort of degree in rocket science or brain surgery. You don't need a theological degree or PhD. God has actually shown you. There is no mystery about what he's about to say. This is something that is obvious. It's in front of you. You can see it. It's tangible. You can hold it. And then he says, this thing that you can see, that's tangible, that you can hold, this is what is good. And the Hebrew word for good is what is morally right. So in other words, he's saying, he has shown you, you don't have any guesswork around it, what is morally right. And then he goes on and he says, and what the Lord requires of you. This is really interesting because this is being delivered to a group of people at this particular time who had all sorts of questions about what God required of them. They had all sorts of religious rites and rituals and behaviors and things they thought they needed to do. And in this moment, Micah says this, he's saying, listen, God has shown you. This isn't a mystery, and you know what is good. You actually get to see what is good. And this is what God, if you wonder what God wants for your life, this is it. Now, our culture is different. We may not have the religious rites and rituals, but we still have the questions, don't we? I mean, we still wonder at times, okay, really, what is morally right? What is the right thing to do? How does a person spend their life? And if we're a person anywhere in our culture, not just here, but anywhere in our culture that believes in a God who has created us, there is a question that certainly arises that says, well, if that God is real, then wouldn't that God have a way he would want me to spend my life? And Micah says, oh man, he has shown you. I took that oh man very personally, sitting there. I figured I was the man on the mountain, and he was talking to me. And he just says it's really clear. What does God want for you? What is morally right? Justice, mercy, and humility. Justice, mercy, and humility. It's interesting because justice in our culture, we don't think of it necessarily correctly because oftentimes we associate justice with revenge. If I do something to you and then you get wind of it or whatever, you hear about whatever I've done or you feel what I've done, you might have a deep sense of justice, but we actually call that revenge in our culture, right? Justice in the Hebrew mind was to say, setting things right. Justice is to put things the way they're intended to be, to make things how they are supposed to be. That is the idea of justice. And mercy is this Hebrew word hesed. Hesed, for the early Christian Jews, hesed was this word, we actually sang about it this morning, this word that often gets translated loving kindness. And loving kindness is oftentimes this concept, it's a huge concept, this idea that Jesus is almost contractually bound by love to you and I, and because of that has no choice but to extend forgiveness and mercy and grace to us. That's the word hesed. Hesed is this idea that I am so committed to another person that regardless of what they do, I would extend forgiveness. That's the idea of hesed, that we would be radically forgiving, gracious people. So we do the right thing, we're gracious, and then we walk humbly, which basically would be, I'm probably not as self-reliant as I think I am. Maybe I'm a little overconfident. Maybe I'm too independent. And I need to curb that and actually be humble in this. So this is the idea. Now, each of these words, as I was on my trip, and I'll just share this with you, each of them, I just kept playing this out as I was hiking and as I was doing other things. I just kept thinking about this justice and this mercy and this humility. And those three words became associated with three other words. And I want to talk about those words for the remainder of our time. I want to talk about water. I want to talk about genocide. And then I want to talk about the word together. So first of all, water. I've had tons of people come up to me and say, oh man, tell me about the climb. What was the highlight of the trip? Yada, yada, yada. And everyone's focused on this mountain. And I have to just tell you that my favorite part, like the most memorable thing for me, is not climbing Mount Kilimanjaro, but it was the visit the week after that we did in the country of Rwanda. It was unbelievable to see with firsthand eyes, the work that World Vision is doing in that nation. It was absolutely beautiful and unbelievable. In fact, one of the days we visited this one village in Western Rwanda, and we showed up there, and actually, like as the World Vision trucks pulled in, everybody was like happy, like just like out and about, and we're like, whoa, like there's like a party, and apparently the party was for us. And so we show up there, and we discover that they got water for the first time, clean water in that village 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks before we showed up. In fact, I've got a few pictures of some of the folks there. This is after we had gotten water with them, and Brett came back to this courtyard area, and they were so excited we were there. They decided that we would want to participate in the water activities that they now get to, and so they invited us, next picture, to wash clothes with them. Like, they were so excited, like, do you guys want to wash clothes with us? Like, I was like, I'll take pictures of people washing clothes if that's okay. I mean, we gave their animals water. We stood there and they were just blown away. In fact, there was this joy. You can see in this next picture, there Anna Gibson's in this photo, but all these kids just gathered around, and there was this, you could feel it, like just tangible hope and joy in this community. And so at one point we met with one of the community health workers, and we started talking to him. We said, okay, talk to us about the difference in the last 2 weeks. And he said, oh my goodness, in 2 weeks, the incident of diarrhea in the community, which I'm going to talk more about diarrhea later, just to give you something to look forward to. And it's not mine, somebody else's. But But he said the incidence of diarrhea has plummeted. In fact, now there's like only been a couple visits to the clinic, which, by the way, they have to walk like 60 minutes to the nearest medical clinic, and it isn't that much of a clinic. But he said the incidents have dropped completely. You could feel the joy. The families were talking about how now they get to wash their clothes, they're brushing their teeth, they're bathing every day. This one parent stood up and shared with us how their children, most often it's children that go get the water, and they had this like 35, 40-minute walk to the water source to get dirty water up until 2 weeks ago. And they would go down there, and the parents told stories of the children being beat up by other children, by adults that were bullying them. One mom said that her child was frequently home at night, sometime around 9 or 10 o'clock, because they would have to wait to be the last one to get water, and then they'd get lost wandering through the jungle back home. I mean, just horrendous stories. And now there's this hope. There's like this amazing thing. So we get to celebrate it. Like, we're just sitting there, and it's beautiful. The kids are going to school. Like, in 2 weeks, I just can't tell you, in 2 weeks, everything's changed. So then we load up in our cars and we drive to another village. And while we're driving, I notice along the way that in fact, the reason that they have this hope, by the way, is this really simple water system. I mean, by the way, when we say they got water, it wasn't like in their bathroom or kitchen. It is in the center of the village. There's this concrete structure, and now fresh, treated, clean water pours out of it endlessly for these people because World Vision partnered. In fact, we asked somebody, we said, how many years have you been waiting for this? And the community health workers said, well, we were promised by several different nonprofits. We were promised clean water 20 years ago. And I said, well, when did World Vision get involved? And they said 9 months ago. And they have clean water. And as we drove out of there were like 4 or 5 of these being constructed in other little pockets of this same neighborhood or area as we were driving out. In my mind, I was just like, you knew what was about to happen to that neighborhood. So we keep driving. We drive about 15 minutes away. I'm not exaggerating, 15, maybe even closer, maybe 10 minutes away. And we go to another village. And this is a village that does not have yet clean water. We go inside this person's house. And we sit down. The dad was a community leader. There was another community leader that joined us there. And we just began to talk. And I cannot describe for you. In fact, I took this picture. I can't even begin to tell you the difference in the two places. Something about this picture just captures the gravity of the moment. As we're sitting there talking, people from the village, these kids came up. The kids were radically unkept. Their clothes were dirty. 15 minutes away. They don't have cars, by the way. Everything's on foot or bicycles. So these kids, they're like different kids. We might as well have been 1,500 miles apart. They're different kids from a different planet, it seemed like. And they're all gathering around the door, and there's this desperation. These community leaders, there was like this sense of scarcity and hopelessness, and there was no joy, and there was like a darkness on this place. And so we're sitting there, and we decide, well, we're going to go with them, and we're going to go get water with them. And so they gather up a bunch of containers, and we're going to go to their dirty water source, and we're going to help them because part of it is just labor intensive. So let's just help them while we're here, and let's participate in this. And so we get our containers, and we start walking. That's this next picture. The average distance that a child walks to get dirty water in the developing world is 6 kilometers. And I was like, well, that's the average. Hopefully we got the low end of the average. And it turns out we didn't. And so we start walking, and we're going downhill. We come to this one spot where clearly, in the rainy season, it's just a mudslide down to it. We're walking downhill, and all I'm thinking is, we have to go back up this hill with full water containers. I don't want to do this. And then I'm looking at the kids. I'm like, there's no way. So we get down to the water source. This is it. There's a pipe that's coming out of the ground. By the way, everything that's flowing out of it has flown down from the village that's up above. We get there. A fight breaks out over the water. When I talk about you could feel the edginess and the tension, there's a fight that breaks out. We break up the fight. And we're standing there. We fill up our containers. And we start walking out. And unfortunately, I got one of the bigger containers. You notice that the guy is passing me because I have stopped. I'm like, how in the world do they do this, right? And so we get this container. And in the house, in every one of these houses, there's a big barrel. And everybody just shows up and starts dumping dirty water, contaminated water, into the barrel, and that is their water source. And so I dump my water in, and I put my container down, and I'm just sort of reeling from this whole thing, and I'm just captivated by the difference between these two places. And I walk outside. As I walk outside, I realize I'm sweaty and I'm thirsty, and all of a sudden I'm frustrated because I left my water bottle in the car that dropped us off. And I'm thirsty. And the only water that I have to drink, if I so choose, is in that barrel. And I just saw where it came from. And it suddenly dawns on me. Every single day, these kids and these dads and these moms, they wake up thirsty. And the only water they have to drink is water that's contaminated. So I started asking around a few questions, and I said, what's the result of this? And they said, well, the biggest thing is diarrhea. I promised you we'd go back there. And I asked, well, tell me about how bad the diarrhea is. And this is how bad it is. In the developing world right now, today as we sit here, 1,000 children ages 5 and under die every single day because of diarrhea. Because of diarrhea that they get from dirty water. So to be graphic for just a moment and put this in other figures, that's 4 737s full of children crashing every single day. I guarantee you 4 737s crash, we hear about it on the news, don't we? We hear about it if it's in 10 years. 4 737s full of children, 5 and under, crash, and they are all killed every single day. And we never hear a word about it. And it's as simple as water being brought to a village. It's incredible. And I look at this and I think about this and I start thinking about the word justice. And this, I look at this and say, well, this seems to be the right thing to be doing, to be delivering clean water, especially the way it changes everything in this community. In fact, the reason we partner with World Vision is they're really, really good at it. There's lots of people that say, I want to go solve this thing. There's a group of people that already got it down. It's efficient. It's cost effective. And I saw the evidence of the way it changes a community just 15 minutes away from another one. It changes everything for them. So when Micah says that I'm sitting on the side of this hill, do justice, I have no idea what I'm about to see a few days later and just how clear justice looks. He has shown you what is good and what the Lord requires. And it is justice. It is to do good like this. Which brings me to the second word I want to mention, and that's the word genocide, which I know correlated to mercy may not make sense right now, but let me explain this. For those of you that don't know this, in 1994, there was a massive genocide in the nation of Rwanda. In fact, right about the same time Kurt Cobain took his life and everyone in America was obsessed with Nirvana, that's when the genocide started. And over the next 90 days, 800,000 people were slaughtered by their neighbors in the country of Rwanda. 800,000 people in 90 days. To kind of make us understand what this would have been like, the nation of Rwanda, if we took its footprint and we put it over our nation, let's just put it over our region, it starts about 40 miles 30 miles this side of Moses Lake, and it goes to the Idaho border. It doesn't even reach the Canadian border, and it goes just past Pullman. That's how big the nation of Rwanda is in total. Imagine our region having 800,000 people slaughtered. Ended up being over 1 million by the time it was done, but in just 90 days. We first got there, and our first day in Rwanda, I went to the Genocide Memorial, which is probably something that I can never erase from my mind, to just see what happens when human beings are struck with a kind of evil that can't be described. To see children who were murdered, to see people that were killed by their neighbors was unbelievable. And so we walk through this genocide memorial, and I'm just sort of stunned, and I'm standing outside of it, and I'm looking at this one particular scene, and I took a picture here because this is the 25th anniversary of that genocide. And I took this picture because of what's in the background. Do you see what's in the background? A city. In fact, Rwanda is one of the most beautiful, clean places I've ever seen in my life. And it is Kigali, Rwanda is a modern, developed, beautiful city. In fact, how many of you saw or you've heard of the movie Hotel Rwanda? It's in that picture. It's not some primitive place off in the foothills. It is literally on top of that hill with all of those other buildings, and it's a 5-star hotel, and it is this developed place. As I'm standing there, my world is rocked. Like, how in the world do human beings treat each other this way? Like, any sort of excuse you make in your mind, any reason you've given yourself for why the U.S. or any other government ignored it, cannot be ignored. Like, at some point you have to say, how do people treat each other like this? And I found myself just wrecked by this. In fact, we talk about revenge and that kind of justice. And my first thought was like, how have they not taken revenge? How have people not just been so infuriated? And then I started thinking, how in the world does a nation recover from this? I mean, how would our region ever recover from that sort of thing? Certainly 25 years later, how does something like that even happen? Don't even have categories for the kind of things that I saw. And I kept asking myself, how do you fix this? And then on my last day, I saw it. We went to this church. Several years ago, World Vision brought a program around reconciliation, and this church partnered together to develop it, and they started integrating a reconciliation project in this one particular town. And so we go to this church, and we go to this town. We walk down into this little meeting room, kind of like a little chapel, a little bit smaller than this, and there's about 60 people that are in it. And as we start talking and start realizing what's going on, about half of the people that are in the room, they are actual victims of the genocide in the sense that they lost all of their family members. They lost their husband, their wife, they lost their kids, they lost their siblings, they lost everybody in this. And so we're sitting there and there's like this heaviness, like all of a sudden you realize, yeah, I know everybody's been impacted, but now I'm in a room where they're talking about it. And then we realize that the other half of the people in the room are perpetrators of genocide. And they're not just random perpetrators. All of them are from the same town. And the half that are perpetrators are the very people who took the lives of the family members of the other people in the room. And so we sit down, they put us at the front of the room, and they're all sitting like this, and we're sitting at the front, and this one woman gets up, and this is a picture of her. She gets up, along with this guy, and he begins to share how he killed her family. He killed her children, he killed her husband, he killed her siblings. She begins to share the look on his face. She saw his face as he was doing it. She talks in great detail about the atrocity. And then the most unbelievable thing happens. She embraces him. And she says, I want you to know, in the name of Jesus Christ and the forgiveness that I have received in Jesus, I extend that forgiveness to my brother here. And I'm here to tell you that I forgive him and I love him. She goes on to tell us that the two of them started a business together. And every day, she said for 2 years they would see each other and they both ran the opposite direction. And she said now we see each other every day. They work together every single day in the same town. We're all just sitting there stunned, like we have no words. I mean, didn't even know what to feel in this moment. I've never seen anything this unbelievably beautiful and tragic at the same time. They sit down. Another woman gets up with another man. And guess what? She begins to tell the exact same story. And pretty soon we realize everybody that is in this room has gathered in this place to tell us the radical reconciliation that's taking place because of the work of Jesus and what World Vision and this church are doing together to bring these people together. Absolutely unbelievable. When you talk about mercy, you talk about this idea of just being bound to extend forgiveness to someone. There's no more beautiful or wonderful picture of it. In fact, while I'm sitting there, I just had this other verse pop in my mind. It's Matthew chapter 5, where Jesus is giving the Sermon on the Mount. And he says, blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. And I just remember that because in that moment I realized there are a lot of peacekeepers in the world. There's a lot of people who don't want to ruffle any feathers, don't want to make any waves, don't want to rock the boat. We're just going to keep the peace. And Jesus never says, blessed are the peacekeepers. What Jesus said is, blessed are the peacemakers. The people that get their hands dirty, the people that get in the mess, the people that get in the middle of the brokenness and they bring healing and reconciliation to it. That is who is blessed. They shall be called sons of God. Those are the ones who are doing the work of this God who has shown us. So he says, do justice and love mercy. I'll tell you this, the other thing I realized was, anytime I ever hear somebody moving forward complain to me about how they can't forgive somebody, I'm buying them a one-way ticket to Rwanda. Right? Because if that can be forgiven and those people can be reconciled, then so can we. So do justice, practice radical reconciliation. And then the final word that I want to mention is the word together. And I want to go back to the mountain just for a minute. There's a part of our individualism, who we are as people. We want to take credit for things. Even we want to think we did it on our own. But I want to tell you that climbing Kilimanjaro is not an individual sport. It's a team sport. And one of the most humbling lessons for me was this. I needed these people to go with me. That's the group of people that I summited with. By the way, did I take a picture by myself at the summit with no one else in it? Yes, I did. But the reason I'm showing you this is that there was something inside of me, because there was this reality that this is a humbling journey of togetherness. Like, I would not have done this if it was not for these people joining me in this. And not only that, not only was it these people that kind of got me to the top and participated in this togetherness with me, but there's another group of people that never end up in any photos, and it's this group. These are all of the guides and the porters and the cooks that serve everyone who climbs Mount Kilimanjaro. They're some of the most joy-filled, wonderful, gracious servants that I've ever met in my life. In fact, when I first got there, I was like, no, you're not serving me. Like, there's no way you're helping me. You're here to help those people, not me, because I'm stronger than everybody else, because I'm individualistic and I'm self-sufficient. But there's this phrase that the people at Team World Vision use. They say, we don't go faster together, but we do go further together. And further together is this mantra of Team World Vision that I actually got to see play out. That together, when we engage others, when we admit I'm not self-sufficient, when we admit I can't do it all on my own, there is a capacity that we gain by joining with others. And in that humility of togetherness, we actually go further together. Which brings me to the last two pictures that I want to show you. We do some amazing things together, and I got to participate in something I wish everybody could. We visited this health clinic, and I'll close with this. We visited this health clinic, and we're driving away, and one of the things that was supposed to happen on this trip was everybody was going to have an opportunity to meet their sponsored child. I didn't think I was going to get to. So we're driving away, and Greg Schlew, the guy that's leading this trip for us, he goes, hey, you know that in about 15, 20 minutes, you're going to get to meet your sponsored child. And all of a sudden, I'm like, no, I'm not ready. Like, I got really nervous. Like, oh man, I'm not ready for this. I got to go clean up or whatever. And so we go to this field office for World Vision. And all of a sudden the anticipation comes because we have 4 sponsor kids that Sherry and I and our girls sponsor. And one of them is this little girl named Ange, who's on our fridge. And she is the angriest looking little girl you've ever seen in your life. Like, part of the reason I took her picture when we did the sponsorship was because she just looked so mad. And I was like, oh, someone's got to love her, right? But now that she's showing up, I was kind of nervous. Like, what if she really is mean? Like, what if she bites or something? I don't know. And so I'm just kind of nervous. And then I'm never going to forget this moment when her and her dad come walking around the corner, and their smiles just light up. In fact, they came over and they sat down next to me. This is her dad, and this is Ange. This is her about to give me a high five. And we just began to talk and share. And all of a sudden, this child who has been on my refrigerator became real, like right here. And I've been doing this for a long time. I've been sponsoring kids. Sherry and I think when we were engaged, we started sponsoring a child. But I'm also a skeptic. And there's always been this question in the back of my mind, like, are there like 100 other people with Ange's picture on their fridge? Or like, is Ange really a real person? There's always those kinds of questions. And so I'm sitting there thinking about that. And then I'm expressing my gratitude in this moment. And her dad starts to express his gratitude. And then he says, yeah, we're never really sure if there's a real person on the other end of this. Like us too. Like, we didn't know. Like, they feel the same thing we feel. Like, is this really real? Is this really this thing? And so we just sat and talked and to discover that I'm it. My decision to grab a packet in our commons and sponsor that little girl, I'm it. I'm the answer. Not $40 a month I send. That changes their reality. In fact, that $40 a month they say impacts 5 kids in that community. Those dollars do. And for that dad to just sit there and say, thank you so much for everything that you do. And I just said, oh man, thank you for letting me do this and to be a part of this. So for all of you who have stepped up at some point and you've chosen to sponsor a kid, let me just say, way to go. You make a huge difference. It's a major difference. There's a family out there. There's a real kid out there. My hope would be, somehow I just want to get a 757, not a 737, and just fly us all to meet our sponsor kids somewhere, and let me just also say this, write a note, write a letter, take a picture, send it, do something simple. I discovered that means the world to them. On their side of it, it's like, oh man, there really is somebody out there who cares about us and loves us. And so I just want to encourage you with that. And then those of you who haven't sponsored a child yet, I got good news for you. As the trip was winding down, this guy, Greg, who's leading the trip, says, hey, we have a couple registrations left for the Tokyo Marathon. how about you and Sherry run the Tokyo Marathon in March? And I said, sure. I didn't talk to my wife, who doesn't like running or races, but in March, we're going to run the Tokyo Marathon together, which means in the months to come, we're going to talk a lot. Sorry, babe. We're going to talk a lot more about just ways to partner and things you can do and present those opportunities. And one of the things World Vision has at their heart is to allow us the opportunity to connect with what God's doing all over the world. And together in humility, we actually can get a whole lot more done than we ever imagined. Amen? Amen. Would you guys stand with me? When you question and you wonder, what is good and what does the Lord require of me? May you see that he's already shown you to do justice, and to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. Amen? Amen. So good to see all of you. So good to be home. Next week, a new series. Hope to see you here. It's going to be lots of fun. Have an amazing week, and don't forget to do justice and love mercy here in our city. See you guys later.